If Iran was really Islamic, then the constitution would mirror that, especially the Iranian regime, which is a very brutal regime, really.
It actually traumatizes a lot of people and pushes them away from the whole concept of Islamic law. Is there a difference between human rights and Islamic rights?
The whole idea of the West bragging about their freedoms is just baloney. Freedom, blah, blah. The West has zero freedoms. Look at what's happening in America right now. The problem with the Muslimin, nobody wants to speak about an Islamic government.
What does an Islamic state actually look like? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're back on the Islamically Correct show, where we don't care to be politically correct because we're aiming to be Islamically correct. Today is going to be a little political. We're going to be discussing Iran. So in the last few weeks, there's been a surge in the protests in Iran. And this is not the first time it's happened. It's happened many times in the past. So the Islamic Republic of Iran, as they call themselves, recently have been synonymous with oppression, extremism, and violations of human rights. What we want to know today is this just a bunch of Islamophobes amplifying these voices, or is there legitimate pain points that the Iranians are feeling from this state? Sheikh, if I can start with the question of really trying to understand what Iran is. Is it an actual Islamic country, right? It calls itself Islamic Republic of Iran. So is it that they are Islamic and people just need to shift their view on it? Or is it that they're actually doing some things that are wrong?
The first and foremost, if Iran was really Islamic, then the constitution would mirror that, would reflect that, right? Can the leader of Iran be a non-Iranian? No.
What? I would assume so. Why not?
No. Can the leader of Iran be non-Shia? No, because the supreme leader has to be a Shia. Can anybody who goes to Iran become a citizen? No. So the basic idea of this nation state, it's a nation state.
Right.
It is a Persian state and it's a Persian construct. So nationalism is at the core of it, and then Shia Islam as the outer side of the story. You know, together they make up what Iran is. It's a Shia-dominated Persian nation state.
Interesting. Very interesting.
That's the basic building block.
Okay.
Aside from that, Islam is about justice. Is the Islamic teachings, is it implemented everywhere? No. For example, the Arabs in Iran are disadvantaged.
Okay.
The Sunnis are disadvantaged.
Based on their denomination.
Yeah. So that's internally. Externally, you know, Iran has been creating lots of tension with other Muslim countries instead of basically trying to integrate, for example, Iraq. Is Iran really taking care of Iraq? Or did it really help the American colonial project in Iraq? Before the Iraq war, why was there an Iran-Iraq conflict? Did Iran try to basically de-escalate? Did they say, let's sit on the table and have, or did it threaten the Iraqis? And definitely, I'm not saying that Iraqis didn't do anything else, but you know, they're both at fault. They're both at fault.
Right.
Nobody's saying Saddam is Islamic, right? But similarly, Iran is as Islamic as Saddam.
Okay. So then in that case, like, what does an Islamic society actually look like? Because I guess what you're saying is interesting because most people think to themselves, oh no, we don't associate ourselves with Iran because they're Shia. Like some people say that, but it's not about being Shia. It's many levels that makes up the state, right? What does an Islamic state actually look like?
Yeah, look, to have an Islamic society governed by a state that really nurtures it, the most important thing about a country, for it to become an Islamic country, is for the leader to be elected freely by the Ummah and to be elected so he rules by the Qur'an and the Sunnah.
So that's a core tenet of Islam.
That is what makes it Islamic in the first place.
Okay.
Right? The country has to basically be led by Muslims. The power of that country has to be within Muslim hands, and they have to apply the Qur'an and Sunnah within the government and the laws of the country.
Right.
Which is basically the just laws for humanity. Everybody, you will have justice in every aspect of life. And you see what I'm saying? Number two is the elected head of state has to be elected freely by the Ummah to represent the people.
That's so interesting because oftentimes when we think of free election, we think automatically democracy. That's why everyone wants democracy, because of free election.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing back home in the Muslim countries is the opposite of that. Dictatorships, or people, you know, assuming power, or it going to a specific nationality.
Yeah.
So that's actually very interesting that now we're actually finding out the Islamic way is free election.
It's a core tenet. Allah said in the Quran, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَ بَيْنَهُم. The matter of their public affairs, أمرهم, is a shura, is a consultation amongst them, meaning the believers. The Ummah has to freely elect somebody that reflect their aspiration. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
Now, there's more things basically that definitely this country has to be a country for Muslims and non-Muslims too, but basically every Muslim in the world could become a citizen.
based on their Islamic identity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
because if you're Muslim, then the state represents you, so you can get citizenship. It doesn't mean that basically minorities, non-Muslims, do not have the right for citizenship. They will be citizen, definitely, without a doubt.
Well, since we don't have that today, obviously, pretty much all of our Muslim countries are nation states. That means that we should understand the application of Islam in those countries, maybe with a grain of salt, right? Is that what you're saying?
Not a grain of salt. I mean, any application of Islam should always be welcomed and praised, right? And any misapplication should be condemned or at least
put under scrutiny.
Exactly.
That's what I'm talking about here. Because many people that are watching what's happening right now in Iran are thinking to themselves, they're seeing the regime, they're seeing what they're doing, and they're seeing the protests. Now, they feel like they're on the side of human rights. And I would think as a Muslim, we should be doing the same. Is there a difference between human rights and Islamic rights?
First of all, as Muslims, we should always be on the side of justice and the side of the truth. In terms of the concept of human rights, it's a Western concept that was invented in throughout the Enlightenment. It springs up from basically their idea of freedom and natural law.
So we don't agree with them?
Well, it's not about agreement or not agreement, basically. Some things agree, some things differ.
Well, there might be some overlap.
But that's not the point. The point is not the overlap or the difference. The point is that, first of all, human rights did not come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we as Muslims basically only submit to Allah. Number two, human rights are fake and phony. It's a tool for colonialism, really, is what ended up happening. What happens basically in the United States after September 11, all human rights went down the drain.
What do you mean?
Meaning basically, for example, innocence before being guilty, torture, discrimination, racial profiling, religious profiling, million things basically. All that went down the drain.
And it was justified because of the enemy or whatever,
Justified based upon, national security, right? So human rights get trumped whenever national security is important.
Interesting.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So for us, the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have given humanity in the Qur'an and the Sunnah, they cannot basically be trampled under any circumstance. You see what I'm saying? And that's the biggest difference. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to go focus on basically the intersection or the contradictions. And even Prime Minister Carney, in his speech in Davos just recently, said that, the world order was really fake and phony. It served the strongest nations.
Wow.
And did not apply when you are a weak nation.
Wow, he said that.
Yes, word for word. He said it didn't apply, and we turned a blind eye to it, and now we're saying no.
That's crazy.
Well, he's only a few hundred years late, but there's no problem.
Yeah.
At least he said no at the end of the day. So when people speak about human rights, I think if you were in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s, hey, fine. But, after basically the world has saw what happened in Gaza and Iraq and so forth, it's just a joke. Human rights are a joke. You see what I'm saying?
Since you've mentioned and made it clear that Iran isn't really Islamic to begin with, like their foundation is not built upon Islam or the core tenets of Islam, then let me shift gears here and ask questions that may relate to the situation in Iran, but not specific to them. In terms of freedom, a lot of people have a problem with restricting freedoms. Like the West is all about freedom, right? The American dream.
That's not true.
What do you mean?
I mean, what do you mean? Like, can't you just see, you're living on Mars or living in here?
What is freedom?
Can't you see what happens in Britain right now? In Britain right now, thousands of people in the last year in 2025 have been arrested for just voicing their opinion on social media. Just voicing their opinion. If somebody wears the skifiyya, it has nothing to do with Islam. It's just like an Arab cultural dress. If you wear it, you go to jail. You get accused of basically supporting symbols of terrorism.
Right.
So there's the police, when they crack down on people, we've seen people getting their heads getting bashed on the floor, being arrested, viciously. People can't even protest anymore. There's restrictions in everything, basically. Even like saying Palestine is river from the sea, whatever it is, that's all criminalized. So there's we're sick and tired of this fake, phony, baloney freedom, blah blah. The West has zero freedoms. Look at what's happening in America right now. ICE is just arresting American citizens, just bashing them, beating them, killing them, shooting them in the face.
Right.
There's no freedom. What are you talking about? There's zero freedom. Freedom goes out of the door the minute basically the interest of a capitalist country gets impacted. At least the Chinese and the Russians, they don't go claim freedoms and blah, blah, blah. They're like, look, this is how we run. We don't have freedoms, right? So the whole idea of the West bragging about their freedoms is just baloney.
And within an Islamic...
In Islam, the word Islam means submission.
Okay. Which means restricted. Well, when you submit, you kind of like...
Yeah, no, definitely not. In Islam, this is what Islam offers two things, equality and liberty, but in a specific context. Equality amongst all the human beings, Muslims or non-Muslims, white or black, Arab or non-Arab, males or females, rich or poor. Everybody's equal in not having the right to make laws,
Legislate.
to set the rules of life. Nobody has the right to do so. Nobody votes on that. Nobody has a say. So nobody has except Allah. Allah basically revealed the full laws for life, and they're optimal for people's happiness, period. The second thing Islam preaches is the liberty and the freedom from subjugation by other human beings. No human being should subjugate anybody else. We should all submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The law and the rule of law is in Allah's hands subhanahu wa ta'ala only. That's why the word ilah means what? The supreme and sovereign authority.
Right.
That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one has a say when Allah says A or B or C. So He's the only one who sets the law for humanity, and that's how humanity can live in a harmonious, peaceful, just, and beautiful way.
Yeah, this reminds me of an ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws a parable between a person that has many masters and a person that has one. You know which ayah I'm talking about?
Yeah, correct. Yes, exactly.
And it's actually, it's beautiful to understand the liberation theory of Islam, which you go from submitting to so many masters to just one.
Not just that. Those other masters are mutashakisun. They're evil. They're conflicted. So the benefit of, even if you're a slave to many people who are conflicted or not wise, and they're probably evil also, that's one life.
Yeah.
But when you submit to one just, all kind, all merciful master, it's a different story.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
And don't forget, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator. When you submit to other human beings, that's basically, being disrespected, that's when you're crushed. Your dignity is crushed and so forth.
Now, Islam doesn't come to enforce or force people to become Muslim, right? Like when
In faith. Yeah, definitely.
The system has to be just,
The
right?
system of Allah is the only just system for the world. But in terms of people's faith and religion, people cannot be coerced to convert to Islam, period. Everybody has the choice and the right to stay as they are in their own religions. Nobody basically gets pressured to become a Muslim, period.
So then, like in terms of like clothing, for example, because a lot of times people say, oh, you're trying to force the hijab and this and that. If somebody's not a Muslim, then technically they don't need to wear their hijab. But in a legitimate Islamic society, like how does that work?
Definitely, like we're not going to enforce the hijab as a religious dress. But there's also basically the public and social decency, right? Like what constitutes exposure.
Oh, like the standard of like what the clothing
Yes,
standard.
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, basically non-Muslims do not have to specifically wear the Islamic headscarf, but they have to dress modestly.
And what would you say to someone who's not okay with, let's say, the set of divine laws and the punishments that come with that? Let's say for them, they don't like them at all.
Yeah, well, what do you say to a person here living in the West that doesn't like the code of law or the criminal law? Or
Get out of my country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't like the country, just immigrate somewhere else.
Yeah, makes sense.
But if people say, look, I want to change the country's law because I don't like it. Well,
Like emotions, yeah.
doesn't make sense. Like, who would allow you to say that? If you don't like this country, okay, well, you can freely leave and go somewhere else. It's very simple.
With Iran being the case study of how many people view an Islamic government, it actually traumatizes a lot of people and pushes them away from the whole concept of Islamic law. What this ends up doing is actually people counteract this with being pulled towards secularism and establishing secularism as a law, right? Or as the governing body. Now, what would you say to us in terms of how we can counteract this thinking?
It's very simple. Look, it's very simple. I mean, at the end of the day, we need to counter the argument that Iran or Saudi Arabia or whatever it is, even Afghanistan, represent an Islamic government. Okay, especially the Iranian regime, which is a very brutal regime, really. Once we counter the narrative and then explain the problem with the Muslimin, nobody wants to speak about an Islamic government and how does it look like, right?
Yeah.
What does an Islamic government look like, for example? 0 income tax. There's no income tax in an Islamic government. 0. If there is a tax, it'll be basically based upon assets. How much savings you have, how much, say, liquid or semi-liquid assets that you have.
Money sitting.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Exactly. Like wealth accumulation is what we tax. Not all of it.
And that tax is 2.5%. Zakat, right?
Exactly. It's 2.5%. Now, there could be additional taxes on that, but still to the rich, to the people who own the wealth.
Okay.
Not the people who don't have the wealth. Just because they're making some income, you tax that. So that's one. This is basically, it will level the game from a wealth perspective.
That's fair. Yeah.
In the West, basically, we've been, for the longest time, not even two, last, let's say, couple centuries, it's just the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer. That's always been happening.
Yeah.
For the longest time. Another thing, for example, is that the access to the law. Right now, especially in America, and I'm pretty sure in Europe the same thing, is access to lawyers is what gives you access to the law.
And if you have money and you can afford it.
Most people can't afford legal bills.
Right.
Actually, one of the tricks by the corporations and the governments, they take people to court until they don't have money to pay their lawyers, and they'll accept any deal. That's despicable.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For example, in an Islamic country, it is 100% not allowed for any agency from the government to spy on citizens, period.
Okay.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
There's no spying, period.
No surveillance state, like, in your own home.
Haram, 100% haram. For example, there's no monitoring of newspapers and TVs and so forth unless they break the law. But people can speak their minds and discuss and have the political discourse and think and write and author and open newspapers and open. You don't need any type of approval. You just go and publish.
Yeah, what we're seeing in certain countries now, in certain Muslim countries, is that's being repressed.
I'll give you an example. For example, the Ottoman law. Let's speak about the Ottoman law. If you want to open a newspaper, you just open it and start publishing. You just basically send a little letter saying, "Hey, I just opened something." You don't need to wait for an approval of a government to start working. Over here, you can't until you open. Let's say you need to register a corporation or news outlet, whatever it is. But that's how the Muslim world used to live in the 1400s and 1500s and 1600s. You can start a political party without anybody's permission. You just start it. A fourth example, there's no poverty in an Islamic country. That's how it should be. The goal is to eliminate poverty. How do we do that? Make sure that basically there's basic income for everybody, period. Now the concept of basic income now is being discussed in some Western countries. But since 1400 years ago, there's basic income for every single person. Everybody should have access to a house. Like right now, look at the housing market is so expensive. People can't even buy a house. In an Islamic country and in a real Islamic government, the supply of housing should be enough for everybody to be able to purchase a house or two. You see what I'm saying? And for example, healthcare should be optimized and free for everybody. Education should be optimized and free for everybody. But that's how an Islamic society works. Wealth and scientific innovation and research centers and public libraries accessible by everybody, judiciary accessible by everybody, business markets basically accessible to all entrepreneurs and so forth. This is almost like a utopia for many Westerners. This is what an Islamic country should look like.
And this is all based on divine guidance.
It's all based upon the Qur'an and Sunnah.
Alhamdulillah.
100%.
Beautiful. MashaAllah. So then I guess that gives us a very clear idea of what it should be. It's very comforting to hear. I think the main takeaway for me, at least, is that before we jump to conclusions and tie anything that's going on in certain Muslim countries directly to Islam and to what Islam should be, or the teachings of Islam, is a disservice and it's not honest, right? It's dishonest. We need to have more conversations like this so that people are aware of what it actually is and what's happening around the world.
100%.
Yeah. Sheikh, I appreciate the wisdom and the knowledge that you shared with us. May Allah allow us to benefit from it. If you guys feel like we haven't addressed any specific issue on this topic, let us know in the comments. Whenever we tackle this issue again, we will bring it up. So don't forget to like and subscribe. If you don't subscribe, you won't know when we drop some episodes, fire episodes. All right, we'll see you next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.